Hey class, so now for your tech assignment, make sure that you have gone through the lecture material and that you have a good base understanding of resolution and frame rate before hopping into this activity. So I've got the footage here, I've imported it into Premiere, and let's start with your first activity. So first of all, let's talk about identifying 4K footage in Premiere Pro. You can right click on it and go to Properties, and you can see resolution there under image size, and you can also see frame rate there. But that'd be very tedious to look for every single shot. So if you hit this switch to list view here, you'll be able to find frame rate and video info, which is what the resolution is underneath. So for your number one part of this assignment, you are looking for a 4K shot to do a matched edit. So a 4K shot is going to be a shot where the second number is more than 1080, because 1080 is full HD. So 4K specifics are 3840 by 2160. I always forget that off the top of my head, but if it's well above 1080, you're looking at some high resolution stuff. So a couple options here to work with. But first, we want to set up our timeline, because if you just drag and drop this 4K shot into the timeline, you now just made a 4K timeline, which is not what we want to do for this project. So I'm going to hit Edit Undo, which is Command Z on my Mac. I'm going to say File, New Sequence, and I'm going to go under Digital SLR and hit DSLR 1080p 30. That's what the instructions say to do. This is your standard broadcast format, full HD. If you shot in 24 frames per second and you weren't doing something for broadcast, you could choose that timeline. If you wanted to do a 4K timeline because a client wanted you to, you could do that. But for the most part, you'll probably live around 1080p 30. Okay, so now I'm going to create OK, and now I have a sequence. So now I'm going to drag my found 4K shot into the timeline. I just deleted that old sequence that I made. So now I'm dragging this onto the timeline, and now it's going to bring up this pop-up that says keep existing settings or change sequence settings. Now I'm going to say keep existing settings, because if I say change, it's going to revert to a 4K timeline. And then that kind of defeats the purpose of being able to zoom in on it. So I'm going to say keep existing settings. But I'm actually just going to pull, a small part of this clip down. So deleting it, I'm going to bring it up here into the source monitor, kind of skim through it. We got a little pupper moving here. I'm going to do a matched edit with his head turning. So I'm going to do my in and out point there. And I just need a part of the shot for this assignment. So now I'm going to drag this onto the timeline. That button comes up. It won't come up again once you've got multiple things in the timeline. So I'm going to say keep existing settings. And now my shot is on the timeline here. So if you ever need to double check, you can go into your sequence settings and you can see what it is set up to be. So I've got my default settings so that it doesn't automatically zoom in on the timeline. What is going to happen on your timeline is that when you put that 4K shot on the timeline, so let's bring this down again. Again, the keep existing settings, you definitely won't forget now. It's going to crop in kind of awkwardly on the shot. And that just shows you that the timeline is a lower resolution than the shot. Nothing to stress about. This just is Premiere's way of telling you that you've got some 4K stuff to work with. So this is great. So now I know I can reframe it by this much, and I haven't lost any resolution because it's that higher resolution shot. So now, to start off, I'm going to right-click and hit set to frame size. That's what my default was under my preferences before. I recommend leaving your default to none so that it does zoom in so you can always tell when something's a higher resolution. And then to do a matched edit, you know what these are from your sequence assignment, is where you timed out those shots to make sure that the motion continued perfectly through the frame, but we're going to cheat because we have some 4K shots. So now I'm going to matched edit as he turns his head. I'm going to take my blade tool here, using my keyboard shortcuts. I have mine set to B, yours might be R. Then I'm going to switch back to the arrow with my keyboard shortcut. And then I am going to zoom in, and I'm just double clicking there to get these blue boxes up so that I can have a matched edit of the dog turning his head there. So now let's take a look. Maybe I want to change my timing of it a little bit there. So I'm going to extend this shot out. Voila! I have a matched edit. So, find a new one. Don't cheat and copy me. Well, either way, if you choose to use this shot for your 4K option, the next 4K option that you pick has to be different. I'm going to show you on the same one, so you have to go through and find a different 4K shot in the footage there. So now I have a matched edit. This is cheated because you didn't have to time everything out. I just made a cut, so it was perfectly timed out. And this is a great way to use 4K footage, create some of those matched edits. But remember that not all 4K shots are made to do matched edits. Do something that you would actually see as a matched edit in a project for this one shot. So, this is an example of one. You know, you can choose from the other footage, but just make sure that it makes a good matched edit. Like I said, not everything is going to make a good matched edit. And if you want to see if you've zoomed in past the point of dropping the resolution, you can go into Effect Controls. And you see this number here? It says scale is 95%. I can scale it up to 100% before I start losing resolution. Now I'm starting to lose resolution, but not too bad. So it's not super noticeable. You want to make sure you're not going much past 100%, otherwise it's going to be grainy. If you can't see those blue boxes, you can just change this drop down to, let's say, 50%. Okay, that didn't do enough. Let's do 25. And that doesn't do anything to the actual footage. It just makes me able to see these little blue boxes as I double click on it. So there you go. So now you've got your matched edit. Now the next thing is doing a keyframe movement. And so you are going to pick a different 4K shot. I'm going to demonstrate on the same 4K shot because I don't want to make your life too easy. Now we're going to drag this onto the timeline. You've picked a different one. You can't reuse shots. And now I'm going to, again, right click, hit set to frame size. And what I'm going to do now is do what we call a keyframe movement. So basically this is an animation in Premiere Pro. So let's say I wanted my clip, I'm going to double click again, zoom in a little bit, to do a nice dramatic pan across. Let's pretend that I had a slider when I didn't shooting this. It wasn't me that shot this, by the way. It was a guy named Brian Buss. He did some awesome CSU videos, and we've watched the clips in a previous lecture of where this came from. You likely have. Sometimes I like to refresh the examples. So anyway, that's, you know, it doesn't look very great when I'm dragging it across here. Let's make it smooth and let's make it happen while the clip is playing. So in order to do a keyframe movement, to start off, I'm going to frame the shot how I want it to start. So I want my shot to start like this, and I want it to pan like that. So I want it to start like this, so I'm going to reframe it to how I want it to start. And then I'm going to go to the very beginning of my clip. Keyboard shortcut is the up arrow. And then I'm going to go into that Effect Controls panel again, and I'm going to hit the position stopwatch. And now you need to make sure that your play bar is at the beginning of the clip. and that is framed up how you want the movement to start. Now I'm going to activate my keyframe by hitting this little stopwatch. It's going to place a diamond here. And now I'm moving forward in time. So I'm going to move my play bar to the end of my clip. You can move it to the middle or somewhere else, but you want to move it to the spot when you want the movement to stop. So now, without touching this keyframe again, I'm just going to drag my shot to how I want it to end. Now you'll see it'll create a little blue line there, and that is the path that it is going to drag along. Make sure you're not clicking on the center point. This adjusts the anchor, so you want to be clicking the side there. And there you go. So I've told it where I want it to start, I've told it when and where I want it to end. I'm going to move this keyframe over there a little bit, and let's take a look and see what I've done. And there you have it, a keyframe movement. So again, pick a different 4K shot or pick the other two, whatever it is, and make sure it would be something that you would likely see, a camera move that makes it noticeable. I want to be able to easily tell as I'm watching through your footage that there is a keyframe movement, but make it look natural, something that you would do in an actual video, like a pan across. Maybe you want to do a slow zoom. So let's say you wanted to do a pan and zoom. So I'm going to hit edit undo. And what I can also do is I can just click on these keyframes and delete them. I'm going to go back to my original keyframe over there. And I'm going to activate scale as well. That means it's going to also allow me to zoom in, because position is left, right, up, down. Scale is zooming in and out, and you have to activate those keyframes for it to track. So now I'm again going to move forward in time. I've told it, hey, I want it to look like this at the start, but now at the end of my clip, I want it to be on the other side, but I also want to do a little zoom in here and kind of do like a pan and zoom kind of situation. So there you'll see it's made keyframes on both position and scale, and now same thing is going to happen. So that doesn't look very good, honestly. I'd probably tweak that. But in theory, let's say I wanted to make it happen faster. I could move these keyframes closer together, because then it'll get from point A to point B quicker. And yeah, and let's say I've got these keyframes activated and I'm like, I don't like the way it looks. I need to fix this. So let's say I'm double clicking and I'm like, I'd rather zoom in on the dog because, you know, he is the star of the show. Look how cute his little pupper face is. So let's zoom in on him more. But now I accidentally made a new keyframe. That wasn't what I wanted to do. So basically what happened here is that I was at a new place in time and I created a movement. So if you want to change where it ends, you want to make sure that you're actually lined up perfectly on those keyframes. So you can just use these arrow keys to get to them and make sure that you are perfectly aligned. If you ever need to restart, just highlight over these, delete them, deactivate your keyframes, and make that work that way, and just start from scratch. Turn it off, turn it back on, try again. Also, I always like to show my students all the ridiculous things you can do with these keyframes. There's also that LinkedIn learning tutorial and other videos that I'll have you watch. But anything with a stopwatch means you can keyframe that effect. There are endless options, but a fun one's always rotation. Let's pretend we're in the 70s. And I want to start my clip. I'm going to activate my rotation, and let's say I'm feeling cheesy. I'm going to rotate my clip. I don't know, 8 seems like a good number. Let's go 8 times. But I want it to end right side up, so I'm just clicking and dragging here. And you know what? I also want it to zoom in while I'm doing this. So here, I want to end with it zoomed in on Mr. Pupper here. So now let's take a look and see what I did. Nice and cheesy. I like to be a little ridiculous sometimes. Do not recommend. Do not demonstrate with this. I want to see something that you'd actually use in a shot. But just to demonstrate what you can do with keyframe movements. You tell it where to start and you tell it where and when to end. So that is part 1 of the assignment. And using 4K footage, reminder, I know I've said it 10 times, but I always see it. Please make sure you use 2 different shots. I know I used the same one, but you have to pick a new 4K shot. And again, these have to be 4K shots because you don't want to do a keyframe movement or a big keyframe movement on something that's not 4K because then you're losing resolution. When you zoom in on a 1080 shot, you're going to be losing resolution. Also, don't pick any CC shot and don't pick the soundbite. Those are not for this part of the activity. Anyway, that's it for this one, and on to the next part in the next video. But start with this first before you move on. Learn one thing at a time.